I abandoned my autistic daughter. 28 years later, our paths crossed at her father's grave. For 28 years, I lived with a secret that haunted every single day of my life. The moment I made that choice, I thought I was protecting myself from a burden I couldn't handle. I was wrong, I was selfish, and I knew it deep down, but I convinced myself I had no other way out. Then, on a cold morning in California, standing at a grave that held someone from my past, I felt a presence behind me, a voice I hadn't heard since she was 3 years old. My daughter, the one I left behind, the one I promised myself I would never have to face again. And in that moment, everything changed. Before I can explain how all this happened, it's very important that you like and subscribe to the channel. That will help us a lot. Only then can we continue. Our future is in your hands. Now, let's get back to this incredible story. My name is Carol, and I'm 72 years old now. I'm sitting here in my living room in San Diego, California, and I have finally decided to tell the truth about what I did. For decades, I kept this buried so deep inside of me that I thought it would stay hidden forever. But some secrets don't stay buried. They claw their way out. They haunt you in your sleep. They whisper to you in quiet moments, and they demand to be spoken. It was 1995 when my daughter Emma was born. She was the most beautiful baby girl I had ever seen. Her father, Michael, was working long hours at the port, and I was supposed to be this perfect mother, this perfect wife. But life had other plans for us. When Emma turned 2, we started noticing things. Small things at first. She didn't respond to her name the way other children did. She preferred to play alone, lining up her toys in perfect rows instead of playing with them. She would rock back and forth for hours. The pediatrician said we should wait and see, that some children develop differently. But by the time she was 3, we knew something was different. The diagnosis came in the spring of 1998. Autism spectrum disorder. I remember sitting in that doctor's office, and it felt like the world was closing in on me. Michael and I had no idea what this meant. We had no support, no real resources, no family close by. We were young, scared, and completely unprepared. The guilt started immediately. I wondered if I had done something wrong during pregnancy, if I had eaten something harmful, if this was somehow my fault. That guilt turned into resentment, and that resentment turned into something darker that I'm not proud of. I was selfish. I was afraid. I was angry at Michael for working so much, angry at myself for not being strong enough, angry at Emma for being different. And instead of fighting for her, instead of learning how to help her, I ran away. I convinced Michael that she would be better off with him, that I was a terrible mother, that I couldn't handle it anymore. I told him I needed space. I told him I was leaving to find myself. What a cruel lie that was. One morning in July 1997, I packed a bag, left a note on the kitchen table, and drove away from everything. I left my 3-year-old daughter. I left my husband. I left my entire life. And for 28 years, I never went back. I told myself it was the right choice. I told myself that Emma would forget about me, that she would be better off without a mother who couldn't cope. I built a new life in California. I worked. I made friends. I even had other relationships. But Emma's face never left my mind. Not once. The first years after I left were the hardest, though I didn't let myself feel them fully at the time. I was running on adrenaline and denial, telling myself that every decision I made was justified. I found a job at a hotel in San Francisco, working the front desk. It paid enough to rent a small apartment in the Mission District. I was invisible there, just another face in a crowded city. Nobody knew my story. Nobody knew that I had abandoned my daughter. I could pretend to be someone else, someone better, someone who hadn't made the worst mistake of her life. Michael called me 3 times in the first month. He was devastated, angry, pleading. He asked me to come back. He told me that Emma cried for me every single day. She would stand at the window looking for Mommy. She wouldn't eat. She wouldn't sleep. Those words cut me like knives. but I hardened myself against them. I told him that I couldn't come back, that I wasn't meant to be a mother, that Emma would be better off with him. He said I was a coward. He was right. But I hung up the phone, and I didn't answer it again. After that, Michael stopped calling. He found a new rhythm with Emma. I learned this years later when I finally allowed myself to think about what their life must have been like. He adjusted his work schedule. He hired a nanny during the day. He became both mother and father to her, and from what I eventually discovered, he was remarkable at it. He loved her in the way that I couldn't seem to manage. He fought for her education, found specialists, enrolled her in programs. He was everything I wasn't. And that knowledge made my guilt even heavier because it meant that Emma didn't need me. She had someone better. In 1999, 4 years after I left, I saw a child on the street in San Francisco who reminded me of Emma. She had the same curly blonde hair, the same pale skin. She was stimming, moving her hands in that distinctive way that I remembered so clearly. And I froze. I couldn't breathe. A woman who I assumed was her mother walked with her, patient and kind, talking to her gently. I watched them walk down the street together, and I felt something break inside of me. That should have been me. That should have been my role. But I had thrown it away. I started drinking that night. Not heavily at first, just enough to numb the feeling. But over the next few years, it became a habit. I would go to work, come home, and drink until I fell asleep. I called it unwinding. I called it coping. What it really was drowning. I was drowning in my own shame, and I was pulling myself under deeper with every glass of wine I poured. Nobody at work knew. I was still efficient, still professional, but my personal life was becoming unraveled. I had relationships that never lasted more than a few months. Men would eventually ask me questions about my past, and I would either lie or shut down completely. None of them stayed. Years passed in a blur. The year 2000 came and went. I remember thinking about Emma turning 7 that year, 7 years old, in 2nd grade. Did she have friends? Could she talk? Could she understand things? Did she know what autism meant? Did Michael explain it to her? Did she hate me? I had so many questions, but I refused to search for answers. I didn't call, I didn't write, I didn't send birthday cards or Christmas gifts. I erased myself completely from her life, as if I had never existed at all. In 2003, I made a decision that was supposed to change everything. I quit drinking, I went to therapy, I started the real work of understanding what had happened to me, why I had run away, why I had been so incapable of handling my own daughter's needs. My therapist, Dr. Patricia, was patient and intelligent. She didn't judge me, but she also didn't let me off the hook. She made me confront the truth about myself, that I was afraid, that I was immature, that I had confused my own comfort with my daughter's well-being, that I had made a choice based on pure selfishness, and I had to live with the consequences of that choice. One of the hardest conversations I had in therapy was when Dr. Patricia asked me, "Do you think Emma needed you to be perfect, or did she need you to try?" That question destroyed me, because the answer was obvious. Emma didn't need a perfect mother. She just needed a mother. Any mother. A mother who showed up. A mother who learned. A mother who fought for her instead of running away. And I couldn't give her that when she needed it most. I had taken away her childhood by abandoning her, and I could never get that back. By 2005, I had been sober for 2 years. I had a better job working in the administrative office of a hospital. I had a small circle of friends who didn't know my history. My apartment was clean. My life looked stable from the outside. But inside, I was still broken. I would see families with autistic children sometimes at the grocery store or on the street, and I would study them. I would watch how the parents interacted with their kids. Some were patient and loving, some were frustrated and short-tempered. Most of them were just doing their best, trying to navigate something they didn't fully understand. And I would think about Michael. He had done his best. He had been the parent I couldn't be. I thought about reaching out to Emma so many times. I would sit at my computer and start typing an email, pouring out my heart, begging for forgiveness. But I could never hit send. What right did I have to disrupt her life now? She was a teenager. She had probably made peace with my absence. Reaching out to her now would only cause her pain. That's what I told myself. But the real truth was that I was still afraid. I was afraid of her anger. I was afraid of her rejection. I was afraid of the mirror that she would hold up to me, reflecting back everything I had done. Michael and I were officially divorced in 2001, though the paperwork was just a formality at that point. We had separated long before that in every way that mattered. I learned through a mutual friend that he had never remarried. He had devoted himself entirely to Emma's care and education. He had become a single father, and from everything I heard, he had become a good one. Emma grew up in San Jose, attending special schools, receiving therapies, learning to communicate in her own way. Michael made sure she had every opportunity possible. He gave her the childhood that I couldn't. By the time I reached my 60s, I had made peace with one thing. I accepted that I would probably never see Emma again. I accepted that she would go through her entire life without ever having a real relationship with her mother. I accepted that this was the consequence of my actions, and I deserved to carry this weight. I had created a life in San Francisco that was comfortable and quiet. I had friends. I had a job. I had routines. I had filled the spaces in my heart with work and activities and small moments of contentment. It wasn't happiness exactly, but it was something. It was survival. I didn't know then that everything was about to change. I didn't know that the universe wasn't finished with me yet. I didn't know that at 72 years old, I would finally come face to face with the daughter I abandoned, in a place I never expected, in a moment that would force me to confront everything I had spent 28 years trying to escape. If you're watching this and you have children, especially children with special needs, please take a moment to think about what Carol did wrong. What would you have done differently? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We want to hear from you. Are you judging her, or do you understand the fear that made her run? Let us know where you're watching from as well. Your comments mean everything to this channel. The call came on a Tuesday morning in March of 2023. I was at work, sitting at my desk in the hospital administrative office when my phone rang. It was a lawyer I had never heard of, calling from San Jose. My first thought was that something had happened, something bad. My heart started racing before he even spoke. He told me that Michael had passed away. Michael was dead. I didn't process it immediately. The words didn't make sense. Michael couldn't be dead. Michael was only 70 years old. He was supposed to live longer. He was supposed to be there for Emma. He was supposed to be the constant in her life, the one who never abandoned her, the one who showed up every single day. And now he was gone. The lawyer was explaining something about an estate, about Emma, about arrangements that had been made. I wasn't listening. I was thinking about Michael's face. I was thinking about the day I left. I was thinking about all the years I had let pass without reconciliation, without apology, without even trying to make things right. The funeral was scheduled for April 15th. I didn't plan to go. I couldn't face Michael's family. I couldn't face the people who knew what I had done. I couldn't face the judgment in their eyes. But as the date got closer, something shifted inside of me. I realized that this was my last chance. This was the moment when I could finally stand in the same place as Emma, when I could see what she had become, when I could witness the life that Michael had built for her without me. It terrified me, but it also felt inevitable, like this was always meant to happen. I drove down to San Jose the day before the funeral. The drive took me 6 hours, and I spent most of it in a state of panic. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel. I kept thinking about turning around, going back to San Francisco, pretending I never got the call, but I didn't. I checked into a small hotel near the cemetery, and I sat in the dark room all night, unable to sleep, unable to calm myself down. The cemetery was beautiful. It was on a hillside with oak trees and flowers. The sun was bright that day, and there was a breeze that moved through the grass. There were about 30 people gathered around Michael's grave. I stood far away, hidden behind a large tree, watching. I recognized some of his family members. I recognized his sister, Dorothy, who I had loved once. She was older now, her hair completely white, but her face was the same. I recognized Michael's brother, Thomas. There were people I didn't recognize at all. people who had been part of Michael's life in the years after I left. And then I saw her. Emma was standing right in front of Michael's casket. She was a young woman now, 30 years old. She had the same curly blonde hair I remembered, though it was longer now, and she had cut it with a style that looked intentional and modern. She was wearing a black dress that fit her perfectly. She was crying, but she was standing straight, with her shoulders back, with dignity. She looked like a woman who had learned how to navigate the world on her own terms. She looked like someone who had survived. I couldn't take my eyes off of her. This was my daughter. This was the little girl I had left behind. She had grown into someone I didn't know at all. She had lived an entire life without me, 28 years, and she had become someone remarkable. I could see that just by looking at her. I could see the strength in her. I could see that Michael had given her something I could never have given her. He had given her a reason to believe in herself. During the service, Emma stood up and spoke about her father. Her voice was clear and steady. She said words, not in the way that typical people speak, but in her own way. Her words came in patterns and rhythms that were distinctly hers, but they were full of meaning. She talked about Michael's patience. She talked about how he never made her feel like she was a burden. She talked about how he had fought for her education, her independence, her right to be treated with respect. She talked about his love in a way that was so pure and so genuine that people in the crowd were crying. And I was crying too, hidden behind my tree, watching the daughter I never knew. After the service ended, people began to disperse. Some went back to their cars, some lingered to talk. Emma stood at the grave for a long time, just staring at the casket. I watched her from a distance, not knowing what to do, not knowing how to approach her. Part of me wanted to run. Part of me wanted to step forward and say something, anything. But I was paralyzed. I was terrified. I was ashamed. And I was heartbroken. It was Emma who saw me first. She was turning away from the grave, walking toward a woman who I assumed was a caregiver or a friend, when her eyes landed on mine. She stopped walking. She stood very still for a moment, and then she started walking toward me, slowly, carefully, like she was trying to figure out if I was real or if she was imagining me. When she got close enough to speak, she didn't say anything at first. She just looked at me. She studied my face like she was trying to find something familiar in it. And then she said, "Mom?" Her voice was soft and uncertain, but it was a question. It was recognition. She knew who I was. She knew exactly who I was. I tried to speak, but no words came out. I opened my mouth and nothing happened. I was 72 years old, and I was standing in front of my daughter for the first time in 28 years, and I couldn't speak. The tears came instead. They came so hard that I had to sit down on the ground. I sat right there on the grass near Michael's grave, and I cried like I hadn't cried in decades. And Emma sat down next to me. We sat there together for a long time without speaking. People were staring at us. I could see Emma's caregiver, a young woman with kind eyes, standing at a distance, watching to make sure Emma was safe. But Emma didn't seem to care that people were watching. She seemed to understand, somehow, that something important was happening, something that needed to happen. After a while, Emma reached over and took my hand. Her hand was small and warm, and the feeling of it in mine was almost too much to bear. She didn't let go. She just held my hand and looked out toward the cemetery, toward her father's grave, toward the place where all of this had started so many years ago. "I remember you," Emma said finally. Her words came slowly with deliberate pronunciation, but they were clear. "I remember you crying. I remember you leaving." Those words destroyed me. She remembered. Even after all these years, even though she was only 3 years old when I left, she remembered. She remembered me crying. She remembered me leaving. She had carried that memory with her for 28 years, and I had convinced myself that she would forget. I had told myself that she would be better off without the memory of me, but she remembered. "I'm sorry," I whispered. It was the only thing I could say. "I'm so sorry, Emma. I'm so incredibly sorry." We sat there for hours, long after everyone else had left the cemetery. We sat there as the sun moved across the sky. We sat there as the afternoon turned into evening. And slowly, between long silences and careful words, Emma began to tell me about her life. She told me about school. She told me about her father. She told me about the things she loved, the things she struggled with, the things she had overcome. And I listened. I listened to every word like it was the most precious thing I had ever heard. Emma's life had not been easy. Autism had presented challenges that Michael had worked tirelessly to help her navigate. Social interactions were difficult for her. Sensory experiences could be overwhelming. But Michael had taught her how to manage these things. He had gotten her into programs and therapies. He had helped her develop coping strategies. He had loved her fiercely and unconditionally in a way that I could never have done. When Emma was in her 20s, she had moved into a supported living situation where she had her own apartment but received assistance from caregivers. She worked part-time at a library, shelving books, a job that suited her methodical way of thinking. She had friends, she had routines. She had built a life that worked for her, with Michael's support every step of the way. "Dad told me about you," Emma said at one point. "He said you were sick in your heart, not in your mind. He said you couldn't handle the sadness. He said it wasn't my fault." Michael had explained my abandonment to her. He had framed it in a way that protected her from too much blame while still being honest about what had happened. He had made sure that Emma didn't grow up thinking that she had caused my leaving. That was an act of grace that I didn't deserve. As the sun started to set, Emma's caregiver came over and gently suggested that it was time to go. Emma nodded, but she didn't let go of my hand. She looked at me with an expression that was both sad and hopeful. "Will you come see me again?" she asked. "Yes," I said immediately. "Yes, Emma. I will come see you every single day if you'll let me." "Okay," she said. "Okay, Mom." The word "mom" coming from her lips was like a second chance I didn't know I was going to get. It was a gift I didn't deserve, but it was also a responsibility. It was a promise that I would finally, after all these years, try to be the mother she deserved. If you've made mistakes in your life that you regret, if you've hurt people you loved and thought you could never repair that damage, please share your story in the comments. We're all human. We all fall short. But redemption is possible. If this story is touching your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe to see more emotional stories like this one. Your support keeps us going. I kept my promise. The very next day, I drove back to San Jose. Emma was living in a small apartment in a residential community designed for adults with developmental disabilities. The building was clean and well-maintained, with ramps and accessible features. There was a common room where residents could gather, and there were staff members on site 24 hours a day. Michael had chosen this place carefully, and it showed. This was a place where Emma could be independent, but also supported. Emma's caregiver, whose name was Rachel, answered the door when I arrived. She had kind eyes and a gentle demeanor, and I could tell immediately that she genuinely cared about Emma. She invited me inside and told me that Emma had been excited all morning about my visit. Excited. My daughter was excited to see me. The thought of that made me want to cry again, but I held it together. I had cried enough. Now it was time to actually show up. Emma was sitting at her kitchen table when I walked in. She was working on a puzzle, placing pieces carefully into their spots with methodical precision. When she saw me, she stood up and smiled. It was a real smile, genuine and warm. She didn't run to me or throw her arms around me the way children do in movies. But she did greet me, and she did seem genuinely happy that I was there. We spent that afternoon together, and it was the beginning of a new chapter in both of our lives. Over the next few weeks, I visited Emma several times a week. I would drive down from San Francisco and spend the afternoon with her. We would go for walks in the park. We would sit in her apartment and talk. We would go to lunch at restaurants where Emma felt comfortable. Slowly, we were building something. Not a normal mother-daughter relationship, because those waters were too deep and too damaged for us to ever fully return to normalcy. But something real, something meaningful, something that was ours. One day, about 3 weeks into our reunited relationship, Emma asked me to tell her the truth about why I left. We were sitting on a bench in the park near her apartment, and she just asked me directly, "Why did you go away, Mom? Why did you leave me?" I had prepared for this question. I had thought about how I would answer it. I wanted to be honest with her, but I also didn't want to burden her with too much of my pain. I told her that I had been sick in my heart, just like Michael had explained. I told her that I was scared and immature and selfish. I told her that I didn't know how to be the mother she needed. I told her that leaving her was the biggest mistake I had ever made, and that I had spent every day for 28 years regretting it. Emma listened carefully to every word. She didn't interrupt. She didn't cry. She just listened and processed what I was saying. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "It hurt. I was little and I didn't understand. I thought it was my fault." Those words hit me like a physical blow. Even though Michael had tried to protect her from that guilt, some part of her had still internalized it. Some part of her had still wondered if there was something wrong with her that had caused me to leave. And I had to live with that knowledge. I had to accept that my actions had caused her pain, that Michael's love and care had never completely erased. "It wasn't your fault," I said firmly. "Emma, it was never your fault. You were a beautiful, perfect little girl. You were exactly who you were supposed to be. I was the one who couldn't handle it. I was the broken one, not you, never you." She nodded slowly, and I could see that my words were landing, that they were having some kind of healing effect. But I also knew that words alone could never fully repair the damage I had caused. Redemption wasn't about saying the right things. Redemption was about showing up, day after day, and proving through my actions that I was different now, that I was ready to be her mother, even if it came 28 years too late. As the weeks turned into months, I made a decision that would change my life. I decided to move to San Jose. I couldn't keep driving back and forth. I couldn't maintain this relationship from 6 hours away. Emma needed consistency. She needed to know that I wasn't going to disappear again. So, I gave notice at my job in San Francisco. I sold my apartment. I packed up my life and I moved to be closer to my daughter. Finding a job in San Jose was easy enough. I got work at another hospital in their administrative office. It paid less than my San Francisco job, but it was enough. I found a small house to rent. Nothing fancy, but it was clean and comfortable. And most importantly, it was close to Emma. Close enough that I could see her several times a week. Close enough that I could be present in her daily life. Close enough that if she needed me, I could be there. Emma's circle of support expanded. There was Rachel, her primary caregiver. There were other staff members who worked part-time at her apartment. There were therapists and doctors who had been part of her care for years. And now there was me. I wasn't trying to replace Michael or take over his role. That role was sacred, and it belonged to him alone. But I could be something else. I could be the grandmother she never had, the aunt figure, the friend who showed up. I could be whatever she needed me to be. One of the things I did was start learning more about autism. I read books. I watched documentaries. I joined a support group for parents and family members of people with autism. I was trying to understand, as an adult, what I had been too immature to understand as a young mother. I was trying to catch up on decades of knowledge and compassion that I had missed out on. It was humbling work, and it was ongoing. I also started writing. I kept a journal where I documented my memories of Emma as a young child and my reflections on what I had missed. I wrote about Michael and the incredible job he had done as her father. I wrote about my own regrets and my current efforts to make amends. I was processing, finally, all of the emotions that I'd been suppressing for 28 years. About 6 months into living in San Jose, Emma had a bad day. She was overwhelmed by sensory experiences, and she had a meltdown. She was upset, frustrated, and she lashed out verbally. It wasn't directed at me specifically, but I was there, and I was part of her environment. In the past, I probably would have run away from that discomfort, but this time, I stayed. I sat with her through the difficult emotions. I helped her calm down. I didn't take her behavior personally. I understood that this was part of her experience of the world, and my job was to support her through it, not to abandon her when things got hard. After she had calmed down, Emma apologized. "I'm sorry, Mom," she said. "I didn't mean to be mean." "You weren't mean," I told her. "You were overwhelmed. That's okay. You don't need to apologize for your feelings, Emma. You just need to find ways to express them that keep you safe. And I'm here to help you with that." I saw something shift in her face when I said that. Relief, maybe. Or gratitude. Or just the knowledge that she had been accepted completely, even when she was struggling. That was something I could give her that Michael hadn't been able to give her in the same way, simply because I was coming to it from a place of deep understanding of what it felt like to be broken and still worthy of love. On Emma's 30th birthday, I threw her a party. Nothing elaborate, just a small gathering of the people who mattered in her life. There was Rachel and some of the other staff members. There were a few other residents from her apartment complex that she was friendly with. And there was me. We had cake and music and decorations. Emma seemed genuinely happy. At one point during the party, she pulled me aside and said, "Thank you for coming back, Mom. I'm glad you're here now." And I finally, for the first time since all of this began, felt like maybe I had been forgiven. Not completely. Not in some grand and total way that erased everything I had done, but partially, tentatively, in the way that humans forgive each other when they're brave enough to try. Michael's grave was nearby, not far from where Emma lived. About once a month, Emma and I would visit together. We would bring flowers. We would sit for a while and talk about him. I would tell Emma stories about Michael that I remembered from before I left, and she would tell me stories about him from the years after. It was a way of honoring him, of acknowledging the enormous role he had played in both of our lives. One day, at Michael's grave, I said something that I had been thinking about for months. "Your father saved your life, Emma. He did what I couldn't do. He loved you in the way that you needed to be loved. And I will always be grateful to him for that." Emma nodded. She understood the truth of what I was saying. She understood that her father had been her hero and that I was just beginning to understand the magnitude of his sacrifice. She understood that gratitude doesn't erase guilt, but it can exist alongside it. As that first year passed, I began to feel something that I didn't think was possible. I began to feel at peace, not because everything was perfect, not because all the damage had been repaired, but because I was finally doing the work. I was finally showing up. I was finally being the mother that Emma needed, even if it was decades late. I also began to understand something about myself that had eluded me for most of my life. I understood that I had had a choice all those years ago. I could have stayed and tried. I could have learned. I could have asked for help. I could have fought for my daughter instead of running away from her. And yes, I didn't make that choice. But I had been given another choice now. I could spend the rest of my life drowning in regret, or I could spend it trying to be someone worthy of the second chance I had been given. This is where Carol finally started to heal. But healing isn't linear, and redemption doesn't happen overnight. If you're watching this and you're carrying guilt about mistakes you've made, know that it's never too late to try. Please share this video with someone who needs to hear this message. Share it with your family. Share it with your friends. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please do now. We have so many more stories coming, and we want you to be part of our community. 2 years after that first meeting at Michael's grave, I stood in Emma's apartment and realized something profound. I was happy. Not in the way I had been happy in San Francisco, that shallow contentment built on denial and avoidance. This was a deeper happiness, the kind that comes from finally living honestly and doing the hard work of redemption. Emma was 32 years old now, and she had become my greatest teacher. She had taught me about patience, about unconditional love, about the strength it takes to navigate a world that wasn't built for people like her. Our relationship had deepened in ways I couldn't have imagined. We had inside jokes now, we had routines, we had memories being created together day after day, week after week. Emma had introduced me to her world in a way that was both humbling and transformative. She showed me that her autism wasn't something to be fixed or overcome. It was simply part of who she was, and who she was remarkable. Emma had also become more comfortable with me over time. She would share things about her day. She would ask me questions about my life. She would tell me when she was upset with me, without the fear that I would abandon her again. She had learned to trust that I was staying, that I wasn't going anywhere, that even when things were difficult, I would be there. It took time to build that trust, but slowly, brick by brick, we constructed a foundation that felt solid. One afternoon, we were sitting in her apartment, and Emma asked me a question that I had been waiting for, but also dreading. "Do you wish I was different?" she asked. "Do you wish I didn't have autism?" I took a long time before I answered because I wanted to be completely honest with her. And the truth was complicated. Yes, there was a part of me that wished I had been strong enough to handle her autism when she was a child. There was a part of me that wished I had been brave enough to stay and learn and grow alongside her. But did I wish that Emma herself was different? Did I wish that she didn't have autism? "No," I said finally. "I don't wish you were different, Emma. I wish I had been different. I wish I had been stronger. I wish I had been braver. But you're perfect exactly as you are. The world needs people like you. The world needs your perspective, your honesty, your unique way of seeing things. I'm sorry that it took me so long to understand that." Emma smiled, and she reached over and patted my hand. It was a small gesture, but it meant everything. She was accepting my apology. She was forgiving me, not because I deserved it, but because she had the capacity for grace that I had not shown her as a young mother. I also started doing something that I had avoided for years. I started talking to Michael's family. Michael's sister Dorothy had initially been cold to me when she found out I had reconnected with Emma, but over time, as she saw how serious I was about being part of Emma's life, her demeanor changed. We started having coffee together occasionally. I apologized to her for the pain I had caused Michael. I thanked her for the support she had given him and Emma over the years. And slowly, carefully, we began to rebuild a relationship that had been broken by my actions decades ago. Dorothy shared stories with me about Emma's childhood that I had missed. She told me about Emma's early education, about the milestones she had reached, about the setbacks and the triumphs. She told me about Michael's dedication, about how he had sometimes worked 2 jobs to pay for Emma's therapies. She told me about how Michael would talk about me, always with some hope that one day I would come back, even as the years passed and that hope dimmed. That information was hard to hear. It was hard to know that Michael had waited for me, that he had held on to some small hope that I would eventually return. It was hard to know that Emma had asked about me, had wondered about me, had wanted to know why her mother had left. These were truths I had to sit with, truths that deepened my understanding of what my abandonment had cost. But Dorothy also told me something else. She told me that Michael had never spoken badly of me to Emma. He had never told her that I was a terrible person. He had never used me as a weapon in any way. Instead, he had tried to explain my absence in a way that protected Emma's sense of self-worth. That was an act of forgiveness that Michael had extended to me, even though I had never asked for it and didn't deserve it. I decided to do something that I had been thinking about for a long time. I decided to write a letter to Michael. Not to mail it, obviously, but to write it anyway. A letter that would never reach him, but that needed to be written. I sat down one evening, and I poured out everything I had been feeling. I apologized for leaving. I thanked him for stepping in and being the parent I couldn't be. I acknowledged his sacrifice. I expressed my gratitude for the way he had raised Emma with love and dignity. I told him that I understood now, finally, what a remarkable man he had been. When I finished the letter, I took it to Michael's grave. Emma came with me. We sat there on the grass, and I read the letter out loud. My voice shook as I read, and Emma held my hand. When I finished, I buried the letter in the earth near his headstone. I didn't know if Michael could hear me from wherever he was, but it felt important to say these things out loud, to put them into the world, to acknowledge his legacy not just with words, but with action. After that, something shifted in me. The weight that I had been carrying didn't disappear, but it became manageable. It became something I could carry without it crushing me completely. I had finally done the work of really apologizing, of really understanding what I had done, of really committing to being different going forward. Emma and I started a routine that became sacred to us. Every Sunday, we would have lunch together. Sometimes we would go to a restaurant. Sometimes I would cook at my house and Emma would come over. Sometimes we would pack a picnic and go to the park. But every single Sunday we made time for each other. It was a commitment I made to her, and it was a commitment I never broke. Rachel, Emma's caregiver, told me once that she had noticed a significant change in Emma since I came back into her life. "She's happier," Rachel said, "more confident. She talks about you all the time. She shows people your picture. She's proud to have her mom back." That sentence nearly destroyed me with its beauty and its sadness. Proud to have her mom back. Emma was proud, not ashamed, not bitter, not resentful. She was proud. That was a grace I didn't deserve, but I was determined to honor it by being worthy of it, day after day, for as long as I lived. On my 75th birthday, Emma threw me a party. It was small, just a few people, but she had planned it herself with Rachel's help. She had made a cake. She had decorated her apartment. She had even written me a card, her words carefully formed in her own handwriting. The card said, "I love you, Mom. I'm happy you came back. You make my life better." I kept that card in a frame on my nightstand. I still read it some days when I'm struggling, when the guilt threatens to overwhelm me again. I also started speaking publicly about my story. A local organization that worked with families affected by autism asked me to come and share my experience. I was terrified at first. I didn't want to exploit Emma's story for any kind of attention or sympathy, but Emma herself encouraged me to do it. She said, "Other people need to know, Mom. They need to know that people can change. They need to know that it's okay to come back." So I did. I stood in front of a room full of parents and family members, and I told my story. I told them about my abandonment. I told them about my guilt. I told them about the decades I had lost. And I told them that it was never too late to try to make things right. I could see people crying as I spoke. I could see myself reflected in their eyes, the fear and the shame and the desperate hope that redemption might still be possible. After my talk, several people came up to me privately. A woman told me that she had been thinking about abandoning her autistic son, and my story had made her reconsider. Another man told me that he had abandoned his daughter years ago, and hearing my story had given him the courage to reach out to her after decades of silence. Those conversations broke my heart and healed it at the same time. If my pain could somehow prevent someone else from making the same mistake, then maybe it all meant something. Years continued to pass. Emma and I grew older together. I watched her turn 35, then 40. I watched her become more independent in some ways, and also continue to need support in others. That was the rhythm of her life, and I learned to move with that rhythm instead of fighting against it. I learned to celebrate the small victories and to accept the challenges without resentment. I also reconnected with old parts of myself. I took up painting, something I hadn't done since I was young. I volunteered at Emma's library, shelving books alongside her sometimes. I joined a book club. I made friends in San Jose who knew the real me, who knew my story, who loved me despite my failures. I built a life that was meaningful and full, not as an escape from my past, but as a way of honoring the second chance I had been given. On my 80th birthday, Dorothy threw me a party, not just for me, but a celebration of our entire family, broken and rebuilt. Michael's other siblings came, Emma came, and she brought Rachel and some of her friends from her apartment complex. There were grandnieces and nephews who had known nothing about the family drama until recent years. We sat together, eating and talking and laughing, and I looked around the room and I felt something that I thought I would never feel again. I felt like I belonged, like I was part of something bigger than my own shame and regret. Emma gave a speech at the party. She talked about how she used to wonder about her mother, how she used to feel sad when she thought about why I left, but how over the past several years, she had come to understand that people make mistakes, and that the most important thing was whether they tried to fix those mistakes. She talked about how she was grateful for her father, who had been so incredible, but she was also grateful for me because I had come back, because I had chosen finally to stay. When she finished speaking, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Emma had articulated something that I had been struggling to understand about myself for so long. Redemption isn't about erasing the past. It's not about undoing the damage. Redemption is about acknowledging what you did, understanding the impact it had, and then spending the rest of your life trying to be better, trying to show up, trying to honor the people you hurt by living a life worthy of their forgiveness. As I sit here now, at 82 years old, I think often about the young woman I was all those years ago. That terrified girl who couldn't handle her daughter's autism. That selfish woman who ran away instead of facing her fears. I don't forgive her easily, even now. But I understand her. I understand that she was broken in ways she didn't know how to fix. I understand that she made a choice that came from a place of pain and fear and immaturity. And I understand that I have spent the last several years of my life trying to become someone different. Emma is 43 now. She's still living in her supported apartment. She still works at the library. She still has her routines and her challenges. She still stims and processes the world in her own unique way. And she's still my daughter. I am still her mother. The years we lost can't be recovered, but the years we have now are ours. And I try, every single day, to make them count. I think about Michael often. I think about the incredible father he was. I think about how he never gave up on Emma, even when I did. I think about the conversations I never got to have with him, the apologies I never got to make in person. But I also think that maybe, somehow, he knows. Maybe he understands now that I finally came back, that I finally tried, that I finally became someone worthy of the second chance that life and Emma's grace gave me. The biggest lesson I've learned through all of this is that love isn't always about getting it right the first time. Sometimes love is about getting it wrong, understanding the damage, and then spending the rest of your life trying to make it right. Love is about showing up day after day, even when it's hard. Love is about accepting someone exactly as they are, without wishing they were different. Love is about redemption over and over again until you finally become the person you always should have been. Emma told me once, "Mom, you can't change what you did, but you can change what you do now." Out of the mouth of my daughter, who I abandoned, who had every right to hate me, came the wisdom that finally freed me. I cannot change the past. I cannot give Emma back the childhood she lost, but I can show up now. I can love her now. I can be present in her life now. And that has to be enough, because it's all I have to give. To anyone who is watching this and carrying guilt about a child they've hurt or abandoned, I want to say this. It's not too late. It's never too late to try. The pain of your past doesn't have to define your future. You can change. You can become someone different. You can go back and say, "I'm sorry." You can show up and do the work. You might not be forgiven immediately. You might not be forgiven at all. But you can spend your life being worthy of forgiveness. And that is a life worth living. Emma is my redemption, but I am also her redemption. Because by coming back, I gave her the chance to show that she had the capacity for grace and forgiveness that I lacked. I gave her the opportunity to heal a wound that had been festering for decades. And in doing so, I finally understood what her father had known all along, that Emma was never the problem. I was. And I'm so grateful that she was brave enough to let me try to fix it. My name is Carol. I'm 82 years old. And I'm grateful. Grateful for the second chance. Grateful for my daughter's grace. Grateful for Michael's sacrifice. Grateful for the years I have left to spend trying to be someone worthy of the love that Emma has shown me. This is my story. This is the story of a mother who abandoned her daughter and spent her life trying to make it right. If Carol's story touched your heart the way it touched ours, please leave a comment below. Tell us what you think about her journey. Tell us if you've ever experienced something similar in your own family. Tell us where you're watching from. And please, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. We have so many more powerful stories coming, and we want you to be part of this community that believes in second chances and redemption. Want to hear another incredible story of family healing and redemption? We have a powerful one waiting for you next. Click the video in the top right corner to watch now. Thank you for watching. Thank you for caring. Thank you for believing that people can change.